after I say no, I've been out of the industry for 2 years. She gets really quiet and very, she's contemplating, and then all of a sudden, like a teacher does, she got very serious, very stern, and planted her feet, and she had something to say. And what she said changed the rest of my life. She looked at me and said, "You're not defined by the worst thing you've ever done, and you're not defined by the greatest thing you'll ever do."
Welcome to the Hope in Real Life podcast with Jason Gore. Our team is passionate and committed to bringing you more hope in the everyday, real areas of your life. If this conversation and content is valuable for you, please do us a favor. Like, subscribe, and even share. You never know how valuable it could be to share a little bit of hope with someone else. Let's get the conversation started. Well, what is going on, Hope in Real Life family? We have got an incredible episode for you today. We talk about bringing hope to the everyday moments of our lives. This episode is for anybody out there who feels like, man, me finding hope is a bit hopeless, is a bit beyond my reach because of some decisions that I've made in my life or the things that I've done. Man, I've probably too far gone. And if that's you, this is an episode for you. I'm here with my good friend, Josh Broome. Josh, welcome to the show.
Hey, man, it's always good to hang out with you.
Yeah. So long-term friend, we'll get into that in a minute. But Josh is a husband, father, speaker, author of his most recent book, 7 Lies That Will Ruin Your Life. But before we get into all that, Josh, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, about your family?
Yeah, so we live in Dallas, Texas, and my wife, Hope, and I have been married for 8 years, and we've got 4 boys. So 6-year-old, 4-year-old, Judah just turned 3 this past weekend, and Abel is 7 months old, and he is a monster. And we're just waiting on that NLI deal for him to be a offensive lineman. So.
You told me before the show. So just number one, your 4 boys, that in and of itself, and so your wife Hope is with them right now. But then strong names, man. I mean, Cannon, Lincoln, Judah, Abel. I mean, strong names. But Abel, your 7-month-old, is 24 pounds and already heavier than your 3-year-old?
Yeah, he's actually, they wear the same diapers. They wear the same size diapers. Which is actually good. Yeah. But, he's a monster.
I mean, being the youngest of 4 boys, that'll be good for him to be able to defend himself a little bit earlier.
Yeah, and his name is Abel. So, I mean, he's got to watch his back.
Yep. And how long have you been married?
8 years.
8 years. And, man, and I know Hope, you got the better end of that deal, but, obviously, great. What's she up to right now?
Yeah, I mean, she's just, honestly, like we're in the middle of things that we, almost didn't have the guts to pray for.
Yeah.
So like us having the opportunity to be in, a community where we do life with some people that love Jesus, and she gets to stay at home with the kids. And, it's like a stay-at-home mom. I tell people all the time, it's like, does your wife work? I'm like, yeah, she has the most difficult job I've ever seen, because like when we're both there, it's a lot. But yeah, I mean, she so historically she was an elementary teacher for 9 years. So she actually loves writing curriculum, and she actually helps out writing curriculum for like other cohorts of like moms and dads that do homeschooling. But she homeschools the dudes, and she takes care of them, and she loves it. And I travel and preach almost every week, and I love it when they get to come with me. I'm super pumped. So I'm actually I'm in Colorado Springs in a few weeks, and Cannon's going to come with me. So it's the first time it's just like me and him going. So it's going to be awesome.
That's awesome. Hey, so listen, you've got an amazing story of what God's done in your life. And so let's get into this right off the top. Can you just give us an overview just of where you have been in your life, where you were, and then what it was that brought you to where you are now?
Yeah, so I grew up in a small town in South Carolina, and my mom was 15 when she got pregnant with me, 16 when she had me. And I share that it was a small town because my father also lived in that town, and he was the same age, and they weren't in a relationship. So when I was born, I don't know all the nuance of the story, but they essentially went their separate ways. And I saw this man that was my father, but he never played the role of father in my life. And that was confusing when I was young. And eventually it was frustrating. And, just trying to figure out, how do I overcome this? And most people have this high achiever personality. So that can be a good thing if it causes you to, work with excellence or have great work ethic. But if you're looking at life through a broken lens and you have that personality, it can cause you to think, well, if I do enough, maybe I will feel as if I'm enough. If I get the applause, if I get the accomplishments, if I, get enough pats on the back and, accolades around my name, and I get enough good jobs and you're awesome, then maybe that would mitigate what I really wanted, was to hear, son, I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
And, that's what I was searching for. So that looked like me becoming a good student, which was a good thing, but I was trying to become a good student so that I felt like I was good enough. Try to become the best athlete. And, I was doing all these things and I was successful at all these things, but I was doing them for the wrong reason, because I was trying so desperately to mitigate a gap that I had, a deficit that I had in my life, in my heart. And, that carried me into, so I started modeling and acting when I was like 13, 14 years old. Went to Francis Marion University for a few years, studied theater, and then dropped out my second semester of my sophomore year, moved to Hollywood, and I thought, like, okay, if I put myself in closer proximity to the industry I wanted to be in, then that would make sense.
Don't I remember from your story, like at one point you saying you had plans you were going to be the next Brad Pitt?
Oh yeah, that was the plan.
Yeah.
That was plan. It was like it was either become Kobe Bryant or Brad Pitt.
Bad news. One of those is definitely not going to work out for you.
Yeah.
For me, it's going to be neither. Ain't nobody going to confuse me with Brad Pitt. So.
Yeah, man. But yeah, I moved out there, and that it was interesting because I was pursuing acting, and modeling was kind of a secondary thing. And like, that was kind of what was keeping me afloat. I was getting a decent amount of modeling jobs, but not a ton of opportunities to act. And along the way, I think it's important to kind of stop and rewind. So when I was 13 years old, I saw pornography for the first time, and my cousin showed it to me at his house. And it's important because, you know this as a father. Part of being a father and part of being a parent is you are a protector and a provider, and there's guidelines and guardrails that we need to put in our children's lives. Right. And I didn't have neither. I didn't have a biblical worldview, or I didn't understand, even what does a healthy dynamic of a relationship look like? Because I never in my life saw my mom with a person and it was healthy in any way. I never saw that. So when I saw pornography, Romans 12:2 talks about you're either being conformed by the world or you're being transformed by the renewing of your mind. The world was giving me an education of, this is what intimacy is. And maybe this person that was desiring to be loved, I thought, well, maybe if I, act out what I see in those pages, maybe I'll feel an emotion that I don't feel now. And that led to me being very promiscuous into, my teens and in college. And then now I'm living in Hollywood, and, this is now, I'm 22 years old. I'm in Hollywood. I've been out there for a while. And then 3 girls come up to me, and I think they're going to invite me to, work on a project because they asked me if I was interested in acting. And they were like, very quickly, they were like, no, we're headhunters, essentially. And they are looking to get me into the porn industry. They asked, do you want to do pornography? And because of the way that I had lived and because I had seen it, I knew it was a bad idea. My mom instilled, some good morals within me. Being a good Southern boy, and I knew that my mom would, crack me in the head if I would have done something like that. But at the end of the day, I didn't have a good reason to say no. And when you don't have a good reason to say no, you're more inclined to say yes. And I said yes to something I ought to have said no to. And if I'm honest, I didn't count the cost. I thought, well, if I do one, like, what will be the big deal? And I did it. And then, it got, somewhat popular, and it got popular enough, and the thing about living in a small town, it only takes one person to know one thing about your life for everyone to know everything about your life. And all of a sudden, that made its way to my mom. And I'm having this humiliating conversation with my mom because she's asking me if
And
I
how
had
far is that after because you said you're 22, how far after that first film was it?
pretty much right away. So it was weeks.
Okay.
Like it was about 2 weeks after I did that. So I had that conversation with her, and at that point in my life, really tracking, because at the end of the day, like all of our problems are identity problems. And if you dig even deeper, they're worship problems. Like who you believe Jesus to be, and who you give your worship to, that kind of determines the way in which you live your life. And for me, my identity was I was my mother's son. That was the thing that I was most proud of. That was the thing that I was most sure of. And then when I hurt the only person that never hurt me, that did something in me, and the feelings of inadequacy that I already had, it was almost like I proved to myself that I was exactly who I thought I was. And when that happened, I think it's often when people experience trauma, they justify things that, externally, from the outside looking in, like that wouldn't make any sense to someone else, but it makes sense in your head. I thought, well, I disqualified myself from being her son, so I'm going to do her a favor. And even though my mom continued to pursue me, I stopped answering the phone, stopped returning her text, because I thought, what good could I provide her in her life? How could I be a son to her after what I've done? And then I just stayed in that industry, and I stayed in that industry for a little over 6 years. And I thought, well, if I'm here, I might as well make the best of it. And then I start telling myself this lie, well, if I make enough money, if I have enough success, if I do enough, X, Y, and Z, it would equate to me feeling differently about myself. And I thought, okay, well, I grew up not having money, and I thought, well, if I eclipse $1 million earned, that would equate to me not feeling inadequate. I feel like I was somebody because something about an additional comma in my bank account would mitigate the deficit I had emotionally. And, it didn't work. And
Josh, I just want to highlight for a minute all of this in the way you're saying it, and it keeps going back to, because you said all of our problems are really identity problems, and all of this, I just think it's worth recognizing for you. So much of it went back to, man, I didn't have a dad around or somebody to say, I'm proud of you, son. And so there's this constant sense of inadequacy that you're looking to be filled somewhere. And I think it's good just to recognize that as individuals, but I think it's also good just for us to recognize, man, all of us have got young men and young women around us that they might not have that person in their life as well. And man, anytime we get an opportunity to speak value and worth into somebody just because of who they simply are, man, you have no idea the impact that could have on their life later.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that 1,000%, because you look at the data, it's like, a lot of the conversations I have is around, building sexual integrity or rebuilding sexual integrity. But fatherlessness is something I talk about a lot. And if you look at all of the world's like major contributors to, what we would call problems, fatherlessness is the best predictor of, someone, being in a relationship where there's abuse, leading to a life that you end up getting arrested, like all these things, like abortion, crime, like you name it. It's like something that is typical within a conversation that's problematic in this world. Fatherlessness is generally a predictor of brokenness in their life in some way. Find someone to pour into you. And if you're that person that, is hanging around at the coffee shop and you see someone with a notebook and they're looking around, it's like, man, the thing that you've been praying for to pour into, they need that so badly.
Hope in Real Life family, I want to take a moment and let you know about a resource that we have for you for your own personal development, spiritual enrichment, and really a way for you to find a bit more hope in real life. We have a tool for you called the Hope in Real Life app. It offers things like parenting tips, financial resources, marriage insights. If you're looking for it, there's even Bible reading plans in there. And there's a community where you can even share prayer requests and know that someone is praying for you for whatever it is that you have going on in your life. It's available right now in the Apple App Store or in Google Play. You can search Hope in Real Life in both stores, or you can use the download link that is in the show notes. Remember, tomorrow can be better than today, and hope is possible even in real life. So you said you were involved in the adult film ministry.
Yeah.
You stand here today not involved. So at some point there was a change, and you might want to add some more to that story. And so if you want to go back to it, feel free.
Yeah.
But at some point I'd love to hear, like, when did something snap? Like, when did you know you needed God? And what was that turnaround like for you?
Yeah. So I'll tell this quickly because I know I can be long-winded. But so in 2012, I won an award that essentially was like, you're the most, successful in the industry. Like, it was the male performer of the year or whatever. And I thought if I won that award, like that would solidify, like, okay, the studios and the people who are in the industry voted that I was, the best. And I thought if I was chosen, that would solidify something in me. And when I won that award and it didn't make me feel like I thought it would, the anxiety that I had was amplified. The depression that I already had was deepened. And I made a very clear plan to take my life. And the day that I was going to take my life, I even needed permission from someone to do that. So I walked into a bank. I had a check. Generally, I would avoid an interaction with a person because I didn't want to hand the check that had a memo that was clear that I was being compensated for doing something I wasn't proud of. But on this day, that's exactly what I wanted. And I walked in, slid the check across the counter, and I looked her in the eyes, and I waited for her to say something antagonistic, to shake her head, to do something to give me permission to harm myself. And instead, she said nothing. And then as I was about to walk away, the transaction was over. She looked at me and said, "Joshua, are you okay? Joshua, how can I help you?" And she saw that I was, I was clammy, I was sweaty, I was afraid, and very much like Acts 16 moment. The jailer, after the earthquake, the jailer grabs a sword, and he knew he had one job to keep people in themselves. And when the earthquake happened, the jail cells opened up, and corporal, punishment was the norm in that Roman culture. And he grabbed the sword and he was going to take his life. And Paul simply said, "Don't harm yourself. I'm right here." Yeah. And in the same way, she saying my name, it snapped me out of that. And it was because in that industry, you don't go by your real name, you go by a pseudonym. And I'd pushed out everyone in my life, so I hadn't heard my real name in over a year. And when she said that, I ran to my mom. I went running and crying, and I called my mom. And after she chewed me out, she said everything I didn't think she would. She said, "I love you. You'll always be my son. Please come home. Wow. You're worth so much more than this." And I did. But what I brought with me was the mental and emotional trauma that came with that. So I was like, okay, I got a job working in the health and fitness space. Started working at one CrossFit gym, ended up getting a job full-time at another one. Before that, I was working at a grocery store and a CrossFit gym. And then I was working at this CrossFit gym and got a great mentor. I think a mutual friend of ours, Jason Davison, he leads the Thor program at Fort Bragg. He used to be a strength conditioning coach for the Carolina Hurricanes, but just like the guy. So it just like kind of same thing. Get the best mentor, get the right credentials. And I thought if I put enough good dirt on my bad dirt, even though I can't change, maybe I can minimize or alter the way in which I'm perceived. I can manage the way that someone perceives me. And maybe if I have enough accolades on my name, even though the reality of who I am, maybe that will outweigh the things I've done. And that's the way I was living my life. And then in walked this girl that was the prettiest girl I'd ever seen. And she could walk on her hands and do all the things. And I asked her on a date and she said no a few times.
I
And
just want to point out, if you can walk on your hands and do all the things, like for some people, that's a higher priority than others. Like for me, I've never thought if my wife could walk on her hands, but for you, it was like the top of the list. So
yeah. She was, she was a lifetime gymnast. Yeah. She was she had like Iowa Hawkeye, everything. She cheered at Iowa. And we ended up going on a run. And on that run, I felt a feeling that I had experienced in a long time, and it was conviction. And I was like, hey, I feel a need to tell you who I am, because if you knew, you wouldn't be here. And I was like, hey, I pretty much blacked out. It's like, here's a 5-minute monologue of every bad thing I've ever done. And, she very quickly was like, hey, are you still doing this stuff? I was like, no, I've been out of the industry for 2 years at this point. And this is actually on Easter 9 years ago when this conversation is taking place. And after I say no, I've been out of the industry for 2 years, she gets really quiet and very, she's contemplating. And then all of a sudden, like a teacher does, she got very serious, very stern, and planted her feet, and she had something to say. And what she said changed the rest of my life. She looked at me and said, you're not defined by the worst thing you've ever done. And you're not defined by the greatest thing you'll ever do.
Hope in Real Life family, I want to pause for a moment and let you know about an opportunity that I believe can help you find a bit more hope in everyday life. Listen, I know a lot of our viewers probably aren't a part of a church, or maybe you gave up on the church a long time ago. And believe me, possibly for good reason. I understand. But I don't want you to miss out on the hope that you can actually experience by journeying alongside of a group of people that really are seeking God's best for their lives. If you are the least bit curious, we try to make this as simple for you as we possibly can. Wherever it is that you digest digital content, podcasts, you can go to the podcast store. You can check it out on YouTube and just search Hope Community Church. You'll be able to find our messages there and check those out. Or if you actually want to tune in during a service time, you can go to gethope.tv at 4:15 or 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or you can tune in at 9:30 or 11:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Again, that's at gethope.tv. We hope that you'll take a chance with us and experience what it is God has for you in your life. You're going to find practical messages that will help you find hope in the everyday moments of your life. Hope you'll check it out.
I knew about God, but I certainly didn't have a relationship with him. And, very like Colossians 4:6, her speech was seasoned with salt and gracious, and she knew how she ought to respond to me. And the way that she responded with both truth and grace, it captivated me and created some curiosity in me. And then we text and hung out that week. And then there was a church that she was attending, but there were several people at the gym that went to this church that had a Saturday night service and called Hope Community Church. And
I know that church.
Yeah. And I went there, and I have no business being here, but wherever this pretty girl goes, I'm going to follow. And I walk in there, and I heard the gospel, and it leveled me. And it's like I've probably preached the sermon that was preached to me. I added some things and whatnot, but it was 2 Samuel chapter 9, and talking about Mephibosheth, and just when David offers him, his grandfather's land and the seat of this table, and invites him into his kingdom. But 2 Samuel chapter 9, verse 8, when he says, essentially, "Don't you know who I am?" refers to himself as a dead dog. I was like, yeah, that's me. And then the next thing I heard was Hebrews 12:2, talking about it was joy set before him that he endured the cross. And something about that just crushed me, because I realized that the God of the universe, with love in his heart, went to the cross, not because I deserved it, because he loved me. And when I realized that there was a Father in heaven that loved me so much that he sent his son to the cross, who willingly suffered and died for me, it opened my heart in a way that only the Holy Spirit could. Yeah. And I surrendered my life to Jesus, and there stood up with snot and tears in my eyes, and a few days went by, And then I show up at Hope and I'm like, hey, can I talk to somebody? And I walk into Gary Vett's office and I'm like, I think I told him I wanted to build a boat or something. I told him something crazy. And I was like, I feel like God wants me to build a boat. And it's funny because I've actually had several dreams about that. But I shared with him, what had happened, and he introduced me to Andrew Yates, and Andrew Yates sat down with the Bible, and he was like, hey, I don't really have time to do this. He shares this with me on the back end, but like, instead of just saying, hey, here's a Bible, read the book of John, get plugged into a small group, he sat down and he taught me how to read the Bible, and he taught me how to study the Bible, and he gave me time that he didn't have. He discipled me, and it changed my life. And in the same way that Jesus saved my life, the Bible transformed my life. I love to, compare it to the Israelites coming out of Egypt while, Moses, God used Moses to lead them out of Egypt. Yep. The law got Egypt out of them. And in the same way, as I started to compare and contrast what God said was best for me, and I knew what I thought and how I felt and what I believed before, and they just collided in his love and his grace, it eroded things from my life. And eventually ended up going to Liberty and got a degree in Christian ministries, and ended up on a few church staffs and did some cool stuff. And then the video that we filmed, that Tyler filmed in like 2014, 2015.
Yeah, somewhere. I mean, you're coming up on around is that a decade?
Yeah,
Goodness
like a decade
gracious.
ago. Because we made the video so long that we couldn't use it.
Yeah.
And then he didn't really know what to do with it, and then he released it during COVID, and that video came out, and what came out of that was Tucker Carlson called me. I flew out to Portland, Maine, and spent a few days with him, and he interviewed me live on Fox, and he asked me, how do you go from being a porn star to teaching the Bible? And I was like, oh, let me tell you. And the answer was the gospel. And I walked him through the gospel live on Fox to 4.2 million people, and my life has been different ever since. But it's like, I love that God allowed me to be in the dark, to heal, to learn, to grow, to be formed, so that I would have an answer for the hope that I have. Yeah. And, that's, I love sharing my story because, man, it doesn't matter how far gone you feel like you are, what you've done, what's happened to you. It's so easy to disqualify yourself from your dreams and your hopes and your desires. But, we serve a God of Ephesians 3:20. He stands ready to do exceedingly abundantly more than you can ever hope or imagine. And I'll share with you this, and I'll stop talking for a second. I wrote down on a piece of paper the day that I was going to take my life, reasons I want to die. I will never be a father. I want to become the thing I never had. I'll never become a husband. And I knew the difference. Maybe I could find someone to get pregnant, or maybe I could find someone to do a wedding ceremony with, but I knew what I never saw my mom have. And I wanted to become that to someone. I wanted to love someone that way. And the last thing I wrote was, I'll never contribute to the world that leads to positive change. And, God is more gracious, and he wants more for you than you would have the guts to dream of. Yeah. And that's not the prosperity gospel. That's who he is.
That is who he is, man. And I love how again, this whole thing of identity and trying to please and trying to be good enough. And then you came face to face with what I wish we could somehow find a way to put in front of the entire world, is that regardless of what you've done, regardless of what you've been, there is a God that loves you just because he created you. Yeah. And not only that, but he's willing to go to great lengths and go all in to make a way for you to be back in a relationship with him. Hope in Real Life family, we are going to press pause on this conversation, and we will pick it right back up in the next episode. Listen, if there is somebody in your life that needs to hear this conversation, as always, please take a moment and share it with them. You never know the difference that you will make when you're looking to bring hope into a place where someone desperately needs it. We'll see you when we continue the conversation on the next episode. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Hope in Real Life podcast. If this content was valuable for you, don't forget, like, subscribe, share. You never know how important it could be to bring a little hope into someone else's life. There's even a place here for you to comment. We would love to hear from you and hear your feedback. Until next time, let's keep sharing hope.